HubSpot's Inbound Conference is back. It's going down live in Boston from September 8th through the 20th. Get ready to learn from the most successful sales leaders in tech. And don't miss the Science of Scaling's live session on how to scale your revenue effectively. Hear from other industry experts on how to differentiate your brand and navigate transitions to achieve growth. Get the latest HubSpot news and product updates, and there's so much more. Visit inbound.com to see the lineup and grab your tickets today.
Is your sales team running a world-class coaching culture? Are you asking that question? You probably should be. According to a study by Corporate Executive Board, if a sales rep receives more than 3 hours of coaching a month, they beat their quota by 7% on average. If they receive less than 2 hours of coaching a month, they miss by 10%. And yet, when the researchers went back and analyzed how managers were spending their time, coaching was last. In today's episode of The Science of Scaling, we talked to Jonathan Vassil, the CRO of Toast. He joined the company 7 years ago. They had about $20 million in revenue, about 50 reps. Today, they're doing over $3 billion in revenue, and they're worth over $10 billion. And oh, by the way, their customers are restaurants, and they sold through COVID. I can't think of a harder segment to sell to during the COVID era. We're going to hear how Jonathan did it, and one of the underlying themes is running a world-class coaching culture. I'm Mark Roberge, and this is The Science of Scaling. Toast. What a crazy story. I mean, and what a run for you personally. Can we just start with just like, how did you meet the company?
Right. I joined Toast in 2017, right around 20 million in ARR. And there are very few vertical software businesses with a field model. Very few. Largely because the economics generally don't support it. And so when I joined Toast, the task, right, was to scale the business. And it really had three pieces to it that I thought were pretty unique. The first was the size of the TAM. I mean, there are, I don't know exactly the percentage of GDP in the US that comes from the restaurant industry, but it's massive. And there are somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million restaurants in the US alone. There's no other vertical of that size. And then we were really the pioneers of the SaaS plus payments model. We were really the first one to have integrated payments.
For sure.
Just allowed us to generate twice as much ARR per rooftop than our competitors, which means what? It means you can spend twice as much. The unit economics I knew could support a large field-based sales organization. And the third piece was really the founding team and the leadership was obviously brilliant folks, but incredibly humble. And they remain that way today. And you put those three things together, the confluence of those three factors, really rare. You know this, like it's really, really rare. Yeah, I jumped at the opportunity and it's been a bumpy and not linear and peaks and valleys, but it's been awesome and a really, really rewarding experience for me.
There's so much I want to unpack just right there, but like, let's just like give the punchline and then fill in all the details. So where are we today? Revenue, reps, market evaluation.
Yeah, so we're somewhere between 13 and 14 billion in terms of market cap, over $1 billion in ARR, growing 30-35% year over year with many hundreds of reps. What I could probably say. Yeah, it's crazy.
Crazy.
And look, we've done it twice, right? We built this thing up and then COVID happened, broke it down in 2020 and have since built it back up. And so we've kind of done it twice, which is a kind of unique thing.
What I think is brilliant about how you assess the opportunity, I felt like I was talking to a venture capitalist, which is like amazing. Use of product market fit, TAM, ARR model, team. So did you ever, on the sales side, try to combat or mitigate future churn? Or did you just go sell everybody and you just knew some were going to go out of business, but for the most part, like 99% were going to be with you?
It's an interesting question. So we did it subconsciously. It happens on its own based on the product, right? And so our like bedrock product early on, still today, is our handheld device. which allows a server to take and place orders and take payment at the table, which was revolutionary. And here in the US in 17, and even today in many ways, that product just forced us into segments of the TAM where that product was really useful, really valuable, which happened to be full serve restaurants, the busier full serve restaurants.
How did you embed social proof in the sales process?
Oh, I mean, like not just the process, but where we would put reps. So what we did was just go really, really deep in a DMA versus going wide. The number one factor early on in who would buy Toast was their proximity to another Toast customer. That's one
crazy.
piece, right? That was like the number one. We did the multivariate regression. Aha, right? The second piece is, in every time we're having a conversation with a prospect, like what our team is trained to do, whether you're a BDR or a sales rep, is reference a nearby Toast customer.
Nice.
Oh, Mark, I see you're, Mark's Cafe. I see you're on Touch Bistro. That's awesome. Joey over here, Susan, just switched from Toast Bistro.
Yeah.
And they mentioned that you might be interested. Like that just goes so far.
Beautiful.
That gets you a half an hour with them.
I mean, what a run. And I know most leaders coming into something like this, you assessed it beautifully. But the other part was like, you must have seen an opportunity for impact. So like, what did you see in that first year and what did you do to accelerate things?
Yeah, it's funny, as the new head of sales coming into an organization, you're like, let me find something I can go fix. And what I found, one was there was a significant distribution issue, meaning while productivity was growing and the company was hitting its goal, it was being carried by 20% of the reps, which is not scalable.
Right. 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the reps. Something like that. Yeah.
Was not sustainable, right, to scale. That led to interviews. I talked to every district manager, every director, top reps, everyone, talked to everyone. And what was really clear was that the system that we had at that point in time was designed to reward performance, but not coaching. And the only way to improve the distribution of performance, which means going from 20% of reps hitting quota to 80, the only way to do that is to hire really, really well and build a culture of coaching and development and align your career progression, align incentives, align everything that you reward across that org against getting everyone to their number. And I've heard folks talk about managers should spend, ignore the poor performers and spend time with the top performers. We believe the exact opposite. Everyone deserves the right to be coached.
Hey folks, just Mark here. Yeah, two things on this thing. I mean, I remember as CRO of HubSpot, we had a great investor, Larry Bond from General Catalyst. He only asked me one question every time I saw him for 8 years. Hey, Mark, what % of the reps hit quota last month? That's all I cared about. It took me like a year, why does he care so much about that? It's such a brilliant summary, though. And it's coming right out with Jonathan here to measure and understand the health of the business versus hey, did you guys make your revenue? Yeah, we made it. But that's one rep made $2.5 million and everybody else did terribly. Big difference. Versus, yeah, we made it and 80% of our team hit quota. So pay very close attention, whether you're CEO, your founder, your CRO. That's a key metric of performance. I like it to be between 60 and 80%. If it's less than 60%, your culture is going to go south. People are just going to start quitting. It's going to be a cancerous culture. And you just look at is your quotas too high? Can you afford to bump those down a little bit? Or you just got to drive some performance. If it's above 80%, your quotas are too soft. It's too soft. You can drive more out of that. You're just not that good at hiring. You have folks out in there that probably shouldn't be there, and you should be raising quotas. Okay, that's number one. Number two is everybody deserves to be coached. This is a coaching culture. Yeah, it's kind of funny, like Jonathan says, everybody says ignore your bottom performers. I'll put a little different twist on it. I find that most sales managers gravitate toward overcoaching their bottom performers. They're putting too much effort in there. So there's actually some very rigorous research out there on this, and I'll tell you what it is. And it's pretty consistent with what Jonathan's saying. It's if you have 100% coaching time, 20% of your top performers, 20% of your bottom performers, 60% your middle performers. That's the optimal deployment. So to Jonathan's point, don't ignore your bottom performers. But also, if you have 40 hours a week to coach 10 reps this week, don't spend all 40 on your bottom folks. Like, because when you spend 2 hours with the bottom performer, yeah, you got a shot to get them up. And they deserve that. Give them the 2 hours. But when you spend 2 hours with an A player, they gravitate to the next level. And when you spend 2 hours with a B player, there's usually more potential in there that you can activate. So just think about that as you're deploying your coaching hours. Let's get back to Jonathan.
I remember my first meeting with all of our district managers. At that point, there were probably, I don't know, we had 60 reps, so probably 10 or so. We were growing, and I had them all read a book, and we still do this today. And the book is The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, and it's all about input thinking, right? And if you just do the right things every day, independent of the outcome will always follow. And that's when we really broke down the role of the DM. We broke down the comp plan. The comp plan did not reward distribution of performance. It rewarded DMs who could close deals, right? And we told them, hey, we don't want the people who are going to grow at Toast, and we still say this today, are not the folks that are the top performers. We want business people that can sell. And that was like the start of this movement towards addressing the distribution of performance, getting into a coaching culture, and all the different pieces that go along with it.
All right, lots to unpack. First off, like, you got 20% of reps generating 80% of the revenue when you come in. That means 80% of the reps, roughly 40 out of the 50 perhaps, are only bringing in 20%. They must not have been hitting quota. Why were they still there?
Many of them were new. Okay. We were starting to scale, so many were new. And we didn't have the rigorous performance management system that you need, right? Which takes some of those decisions out of, it makes it a little more empirical, objective versus qualitative. Right?
What'd you put in?
We brought in a couple things. So we right away began what we call performance management, which is a rubric that we use that basically over a period of time, allows the company to move on from reps that are not performing at an adequate level.
Yeah, explain it to like a founder or seller who's listening right now. Like, I need to build this. Like,
so this is really simple. So it's, I'll just use an example. So you might say, hey, once you're ramped, if you miss quota in month one, post ramp, or any month, it's a verbal warning. Any month. Miss quota, any month. If you miss quota 2 months in a row, it's a written warning. If you miss quota 3 months in a row, we have the option to terminate. And the option is the key word, because there are circumstances, there are issues, there are things that pop up that you need to adjust for to be fair. But if you miss quota 3 months in a row, we have the option to terminate.
Yes, you need a PIP. It needs to be as binary and quantitative and non-subjective as possible, because that introduces politics. You probably want to just tell everyone what it is on the first day of the job. Just be really transparent about it. No surprises. You will never get fired if you're not on a PIP. Here's how the PIP works, unless you break the law. But here's how a PIP works. It's very clear. Miss your quota 1 month, verbal. Miss your quota 2 months in a row, written. Miss your quota 3 months in a row, option to terminate. So cut and dry. That's going to drive a performance culture. I'll give you a different opinion. Not that I disagree. Jonathan's built an awesome company. Bow down. Awesome. I'm a little concerned about the option to terminate. For me, it's like that can create subjectivity in politics. Julie got a free card because, Jonathan just likes Julie more. Sarah got fired because she wasn't around for the foosball games. So I just don't like the political aspect, but absolutely here, best practice. Define the PIP, tell everyone about it, very transparent performance culture. Let's get back to Jonathan.
Team attainment. First thing we do with the managers, prior to this change, all of their comp was tied to how much ARR did you bring in? We changed that. We said, that's important, but getting 80% of your team to quota each month is actually even more important. It's the only way we're going to be able to scale. And so I remember we started this in January of 18. I started in August of 17. January 1, roll out the new comp plan. We have this new team attainment component, which means as a DM, every month, 75% or more of your team has to hit their monthly quota, or you don't get this money.
Beautiful. So it's kind of like, it's a gate in a way where it's like, I'm going to pay you X% on the revenue production of your team. I'm only going to pay it if 75% of your reps make quota. If less than 75%, you get nothing for your commission.
We took a portion of their OTE.
Right. So it's kind of like, I'll make up the numbers, but it's like, you get 2% no matter what, but we'll pay you at 4% if 75% of your reps make quota, something like that.
Roughly. It's mechanics are different, but roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we bring that in. Really, I think a big lever for us is our career progression model. And this kind of gets into our value proposition and how we reinforce that with our team. But we've got 6 or 7 different levels of AEs within our SMB world, not even including enterprise or mid-market or hotels or retail and other areas. And so if you hit certain objective hurdles within the time frame, guess what? You get promoted from an AE to senior AE, to principal 1, all the way to principal 4 or 5. Every time you jump up a level, which you earn objectively through performance, you get a base, your base goes up, your commission rate goes up, your OTE goes up. But for all the founders out there, their quotas go up too. The CAC actually goes down.
Doesn't the rep do the math and they're like, well, this is cool. Like I used to have a OTA of 130, like 65 base and 65 commission. And my quota was whatever, 600K ARR. So my effective, I'm making up the math, I'm going to do it in my head, but like my effective like payout for an ARR was like $130. And now you bumped me to 70, 140. That's great. But you increased my ARR quota to 700. Now I get paid less per ARR.
Yeah. So 2 things. 1, the step up is more drastic.
Beautiful.
Right. And number 2, they're already performing at that level. Right. In order to get there, it's not just hitting quota. There's a premium on top of it. Right. So they're already performing at that level. And then you go back to the social proof and the network effects. And what ends up happening is as you begin to build your territory, you get more and more referrals from your customers. Right. And so you got this flywheel effect starting to happen as well.
I want to go back to like, as you set this up, you mentioned that you interviewed the district managers. Tell us about that conversation. Were you just like, who's good and who's bad? Like, what did you ask?
No, how do you spend your time?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, I went to spend time with them. I flew all across the country, doing ride-alongs with the managers. And I'd ask them, what are you coaching this rep on today? Oh, this rep that we're going to spend time with, what are the top 2 to 3 things you're coaching them on? And you're just evaluating their answer. But what I've learned, as we've scaled, the big forcing functions are as important as anything you can do, right? Once we brought in the team attainment factor in the comp plan, the DMs were like, I need to start coaching. I need to be really thoughtful about who I hire, right? And I got to coach them up because get into my number, but having half my team this quota is not acceptable at this company anymore. It's going to hold me back as a manager. I'm not going to get promoted.
Talking Too Loud, hosted by Chris Savage, is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. On this podcast, Chris Savage, Wistia CEO and loudest talker, takes you inside the minds of entrepreneurs as they share the hilarious, informative, and most challenging aspects of building more human brands. You can hear episodes like Building a Reusable Notebook Empire with entrepreneur Joe LeMay, or The AI Video Revolution with Wistia's own head of production, Chris Levine. Listen to Talking Too Loud wherever you get your podcasts.
I love what you said in the beginning where you're like, we just got to change this to a coaching culture. And I wanted to double click into that because you, in response to my question around performance management, you laid out the 3 things, one of which was the district manager comp plan. And I can see how that is designed to drive coaching. Was there anything else outside of that conversation, like in the overall go-to-market system that you used to transition to a really excellent coaching culture?
Everything's built around it. And it's every detail has to reinforce for us this culture and the value proposition of why they're working at Toast, which is very, very important to us. I could talk about that. I'll give you a small example. So I sat in a room with our top leaders. We spent 2 days mapping out what are the 5 critical activities of a DM. The DM's a very, very difficult role at Toast, especially when you're growing rapidly and teams are, you gotta hit a number, you gotta hire 6 people, just really hard. So we try to say, what are the top 5 activities that our best managers do that we can scale, right? And it was like they hire really, really well. They hold great weekly team calls. They build awesome coaching plans for reps. They give really, really clear feedback after a ride along and a few other things. And we sat in a room for 2 days. They do great pipeline reviews. And we said, okay, let's model what we want DMs to do. We argued, this is how you have to do it. We argued for like 4 hours on the purpose of a pipeline review. Is it an accountability exercise or is it a coaching tool? Which is it? Our team will tell you we argued for hours, and it ended up for us, that particular exercise, the pipeline review, is about accountability and about validating the funnel, right? The coaching would happen elsewhere. And so we designed a process.
Hey folks, just Mark here. Yeah, Jonathan is giving us the blueprint on how to hold the organization accountable to a coaching culture. That is a correlation with sales excellence. And so this is essentially what's happening. Like you've got, 30 district managers, and you've got probably like 4 directors that are managing them folks. Here it is, simple, just like what he said. First day of every month, I'm Jonathan. I have a 90-minute one-on-one with every director. Those directors have 4 managers and 40 reps under them. And what I'm doing is I'm asking the director, and this is all documented, 3 things for every rep. Number 1, what is your manager coaching that rep on this month? Number 2, how are they coaching them on that? Number 3, how are we going to measure if the coach did a good job and the rep improved? That's it. Example. Yeah, Bob's doing great, but look at his close ratio. It's in the bottom 20% of the team. We've diagnosed it. We've listened to 7 calls the manager did, and it turns out that he's terrible at sense of urgency development. That's the diagnosis. Great. What's the coaching plan? Well, his manager, Sarah, is going to do 3 gone call recordings this month and coach him from the perspective of sense of urgency development. Awesome. How are you going to measure if it worked? Well, his current demo to close rate is 19%, which, like I said, is in the bottom 20% of the team. And we believe that we can drive that up to 25% in this month and 30% in the next month. Beautiful. Let's move on to Travis. It's that simple. And because you're doing that as CRO, the district manager has to have the same conversation before you're meeting with each manager. And because they're having that meeting with each manager, the managers have to have a one-on-one with the reps to go through that plan.
And here's where it comes in. We designed a process for how you provide feedback to a rep after a demo or after a ride-along. The other backdrop here is we're growing. So what does that mean? That means we're creating a lot of manager roles and a lot of director roles and a lot of VP roles. And we prefer to hire from within. Now, the gate, if you're a DM and you apply to be an RVP, guess what you got to show us to even apply? You got to show me your pipeline reviews. You got to show me your coaching feedback. You got to show me the coaching plans that you built. If you don't have them, don't apply. So I remember we had a DM, top performer. All the numbers were really, really strong. We said, okay, send us your ride-along recaps. They were applying for the job in like April. The most recent recap they sent us was like from November, which is when we rolled out the training. And they hadn't done the actual work since November. And we're like, you can't apply.
Crazy.
Right? We're rewarding the behavior that we want. We're trying to get that modeled across the team.
It's a wonderful deep dive on the sort of like sales coaching aspect of the go-to-market system, which is amazing. What did you look for to know that this person was going to work in Toast?
Yeah. Our chief task was to scale. That's how you grow. You grow sales capacity, you grow ARR. And we were limited. Our constraint was our OTE, right? Our OTEs were like 100K. And like, well, 100K is a lot to somebody. That was like what our thought was. 100K is a lot to, who is that? Who is that person that's a lot of money? We moved from, hey, you got to have software sales experience or food tech experience to more of a DNA hire. And we did this early on. The DNA hire, we started by, in our interview process, collecting data. We measured 3 things. We still do it today: work ethic, coachability, what we call the ability to connect the dots. As long as and so we started to score, we scored our current team. So we had 60 reps. We had all the managers score the current team on those 3 factors. We then began capturing data on all of our interviews. So we knew that work ethic, coachability, intellect were important. But after about 8 months, we had all this data. And we said, okay, show me our top performers and what's most correlated of those three, right? And it was work ethic. Clear. Coachability and intellect didn't actually matter unless you were a hard worker. And so we unpacked work. Well, what's work ethic? What does that mean? Ambition, detail, bias for, like, you go through the 5 or 6 things. And then what do? We built our entire hiring process around that.
No, it's beautiful, but that's great. Amazing process. Give us more on how you assess for that.
Great question. So I'll give you an example. They got to pitch us one of our products. And we know if you do a little bit of research in that 5-minute pitch, right, you're going to rip off 10 to 15 features or benefits if you've done your homework, which is an indication of work ethic. And let's say the hurdle is you got to have at least 10 features or benefits that you touch on during that 5-minute pitch. Well, it becomes binary for the manager, right? Did you or did you not? Right. And they do the pitch 3 times. Each time it's got to improve, which is a factor of coachability. We give them the feedback.
Jonathan is walking us through a beautiful evolution on how to be a world-class sales hiring team. There is rigorous research that says that those people that put the most weight on years of experience selling to my buyer and my product type fails. It's intuitive that it would work. And most CEOs and inexperienced sales hiring leaders gravitate to that. And it's not that it hurts. It doesn't hurt for someone to have 5 years of experience selling a similar product to a similar buyer. It's just that you don't look at anything else. And when you do that, you end up with the bottom 50% performers in your industry. DNA, to Jonathan's point, is a much bigger driver of success. Now, what Jonathan did was a beautiful process. He had some hypotheses: work ethic, intelligence, coachability, the ability to connect the dots. I don't know if those are the ones for you. They're probably not. But it's the process that we have to focus on here, is to take a step back and hey, we got 40 reps. Who are the top 10? What is similar about them? Let's use that to develop our hypothesis interview scorecard. It's, in his case, it was work ethic, intelligence, etc. And clearly define, what do we mean? Let's write 3 sentences about each one. And let's write a paragraph about what a high score and a medium score and a low score would sound like. That's the scorecard. Because guess what? In the next year, we're going to promote 10 sales managers who've never hired before. This scorecard is going to be super useful. And then let's take it a step further. It's holy cow, as we keep looking at this quarter after quarter after quarter, work ethic is the one that drives it the most. How are we assessing on work ethic? How can we assess even better on work ethic? We have our scorecard. It's very clear what attributes we need to look for. It's very clear what a high, medium, and low is going to sound like. But how can we get better in an hour interview or a 1-week interview process of assessing a salesperson? That's what we have to go through. And every 6 months after we make a hire, we assess, did they do well or not? And did the scorecard catch it? And if not, how can we iterate the scorecard to get better? Let's get back to Jonathan.
And so it's all about what you do.
Well, this has been amazing, Jonathan. Thank you so much for coming on the show and dropping all this wisdom.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, that does it for me, folks. I'd like to thank our showrunner, Matthew Brown. Editing support comes from Pizza Shark Productions. Of course, I want to thank HubSpot for Startups and the HubSpot Podcast Network for keeping the audio on. And by the way, if I'm a huge fan of feedback. And so get this, if you're listening on Spotify right now, check your phone, see that Q&A field? That's a direct line to me and our show. So let us know what you think. All right, I'll see you next week.